Good morning, Susanna.
Hi, Juan. How's it going?
It's going good. How's it going with you?
Pretty good. I'm just making sure I've got everything I need open. So when I go to share, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm
Gotcha.
okay. I tried to make Ian Lighthizer a co-host also because he's got like a long presentation,
Oh,
and
gotcha.
but I couldn't do it. It said
Oh,
it wasn't in
that's.
my account or something like that. So I don't know.
Oh, you mean like you did me yesterday, like you did with
Yeah.
me? Yeah, ahead of time, like scheduling the co-host that that you want to designate must be a licensed user.
Oh, okay. So he's
Now,
not a licensed
and
user.
he's not a licensed user, but once he joins today, in during the webinar, you can make anybody a co-host.
Okay.
That's
That's
the difference
okay.
between during and before. Yeah.
Okay.
However,
Sounds good.
if he's a panelist, he should be able to share. All
Okay.
panelists have the ability to share. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So it should be
Oh, and I
okay.
see you have the closed captioning going,
Is
so
that
looking
okay?
good. Yeah, absolutely.
And then a transcript. So this will automatically transcript it?
It will be there. There will be a closed caption transcript, and there will be a separate transcript that in the recording that
Okay.
always happens regardless of whether you have the captioning on or not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Anything else I should
The
do?
only thing that maybe for some participants, it might be good to remind them once the meeting gets started that if the captioning is getting in the way, they
Mm-hmm.
have a closed caption button in their controls, in their meeting
Okay.
controls next to raise hand and all that, where
Mm-hmm.
they can actually hide that captioning.
Okay.
If they feel that it's in their way, they cannot see the whole screen or it's blocking a presentation,
I
they can
see.
always go
Okay.
hide it and they can go unhide it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just leave it on.
Yeah, it will be
Yeah.
great to leave it on again, and it'll be there in the recording if somebody wants to watch it later or yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Hi, Kayla. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. I think I kind of know what I'm doing. I haven't done a Zoom meeting very many times. Well, one can say the first one was a disaster,
The first,
but
like right now, it looks good.
yeah,
It's
I think
recording right now,
we're
which is
good.
cool.
So yeah, so that's good. Yeah, it looks like we have a few people. Uh, let's see, a few people already. Let's see. Eric Tobiasen is a panelist, so I will add him. Hi, Eric.
Good morning.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Great. I was
All right.
muted and unvideoed, so sorry about that.
That's okay. So Juan and Kayla, it looks like we have a few attendees already, Mike Satcher and Chris Kluart, maybe here for the public comment. So we may bump the public comment up at the beginning, but so do I need to promote them to panelists?
Um,
No. Oh, go ahead, Kayla.
oh, I was
Since
gonna
you're the
let
expert.
you're the pro, but I was gonna say probably the same thing you're gonna say, that you don't have to, that we
Okay.
can give them the ability to talk.
Okay. Sounds
Am I
good.
right, Juan?
Yes, just like we
Okay.
handle council meetings and all the other meetings. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if, well, I don't think you've had that experience before, Susanna, because I don't know that in the other meeting that you manage, I don't know that you've had public comment in the past. So
No.
if you have the participants pane open right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you go to the attendees column, you'll see
Mm-hmm.
the names of these individuals. If you hover your mouse, you can
Mm-hmm.
see that there's the option to allow to talk.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's what you will click to allow them to talk. Then once they're done, under the more option, there will
Mm-hmm.
be an option to remove that ability to talk. And
Okay.
then that's how you remove that ability. So
Sounds good.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
and I'll put together here a really quick instruction slide for this meeting. Are you gonna have a time limit on public comment if there's anybody who's
Yeah,
willing
I
to
had
provide?
10 minutes towards the end. Maybe I can ask the folks that are on, oh, we're getting more actually. If they wanted to just listen to the meeting or if they're intending on public comment, and we can have a public comment section at the beginning of the meeting too, if they need to make comment and then go, or if they want to hang out. So let me just promote a couple of them to talk to see what they're, if that's
Yeah, and
okay.
actually, yeah, or you can ask them also to just raise their hand now if they're planning on
Okay.
doing that, and that's a good way to, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So hi folks that are attending. Are you intending to you could raise your hand if you're intending to make public comment? That would be helpful so we know how many folks are intending to do that. Looks like 3. Okay. And why don't you put your hands down and raise again if you would like to talk at the beginning of the meeting, and you maybe need to go somewhere, or if you would like to wait till the end and then talk. I see 1 for beginning of meeting. No, none. Okay. Okay, so I think we can hold off on public comment till the end of the meeting. However it
Sounds-
works for folks. Okay.
That works.
Okay. Okay, so I think sort of got it. Oh, I've got a Q&A.
Yeah, it looks
Oh,
like
could we
that's
keep it at the
on.
end? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you're gonna be monitoring that. If you're not, Susanna, it might be good to remind attendees that, you know, it's best not to use that and wait until the public comment at the end, but
Okay.
it's up to you entirely. Don't want you to have to do too many things at once.
Okay, I know.
I know it can be stressful
I
managing
know.
a
I
public meeting.
know. Yeah. All right. Looks like
Oh.
folks are joining. Hi, Barb.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Campbell.
Hi, Juan.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right.
Good. Thumbs up. Good.
Yeah.
Thanks for the email the other day, Barb.
Oh, you're welcome. I saw you on Facebook.
Losing a little buddy is tough. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, goodness, it's hard.
Yeah. Wish they could live forever. Little furry friends.
Oh, I am becoming concerned that I have set myself up to have like 6 animals all leave me within a year or something. Like,
That's
Barb,
absolutely what we have going on too. I know.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think of that when I was adopting doggies.
Yeah. How old are yours?
They are, let's see, my 2 dogs are 10 years old, maybe. So they're getting up there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then our little Harvey, she's our mystery. We don't know how old she is.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 6 or 8 or something.
Yeah.
And then there are cats. Yeah.
Yeah.
I left my phone somewhere and I can hear it ringing. Right back.
Okay.
And I see more
Yep.
public showing up. I don't know if anybody needs to be promoted. So maybe hands.
Yeah, Hans, I think. Yeah. And Stacy. Next time I'll send them invitations to be panelists before I do the meeting. All right. Good morning, Stacy. Good morning, Hans.
Good morning.
Hans. Hi.
Good morning.
Giving folks a few more minutes to get here.
Hi, Hans.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am well.
Good. I looked, I think every day this week is supposed to be warmer than the day before.
Of course. And then it all changes because it's Central Oregon.
Of course. Hi, Eric.
Good morning, Barb. How are you?
I'm all right. How about yourself?
Fantastic.
Good.
Excited for spring. I've been vaccinated. Life is good.
Oh, have you?
Yep.
Exciting. Yeah.
Well, part way. I'm 2 weeks into it, so got the first shot, and it wasn't Johnson & Johnson. So
I had a knee replaced 2 weeks ago. And the same day as surgery, I got a little notice saying I could get the vaccine. But I thought, I think maybe I want to wait. I've heard some folks have had trouble on that second one, So, but yeah.
Barb, which vaccine did you get the first one?
I haven't gotten yet.
Okay.
Yeah. I got the notice that I could, but decided I'd give myself a little bit of time, let my knee heal a little while before vaccines, maybe. When I looked, it looked like I could choose between Pfizer or Moderna. Do you know, Kathy? Is there any?
Well, I had the Moderna, and the only effect on the first one I had was a little tired the next day. And then the second dose, I was tired the next day and had a very, very mild headache, and that was it. So, but having your knee replaced is a much bigger deal, and I've had mine replaced, and it was very hard for me. So hopefully it'll be easier for you.
Oh, thank you. I've got my 2 week. It's been 2 weeks, so I've got an appointment today to go in and get it X-rayed. And as far
And
as
are you doing the physical therapy? And
yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Good.
Yep.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you. You can help decide, will you call me Robo-Barb or Robarb?
Yeah, well, I have an artificial knee and hip, so I do feel like, Robo Kathy too.
Exactly.
And I need the other knee done, and I just don't want to do it. So yeah.
Oh, I'm glad I put it off too long. Yeah. So
yeah. Well, the scar does eventually flatten down and kind of disappear. It looks terrible initially, but eventually it just looks like a little thin white line, at least on my leg. So that part you don't need to worry about.
I was thinking tattoo.
A pole vaulter, and that line could be the pole.
I thought the little stitches, and then be like in Cinderella, and then have like a little bird at the top holding the string, that might be funny.
Okay, I'll mute myself now, folks. Don't worry.
It's all good. It's all good hearing everybody's vaccine stories. I'm just admitting a few more people as they arrive. So I might be a little distracted while we start the meeting, but I think we've got most everybody here. It's hard for me to multitask. So thanks everyone for coming. I'm Susanna Jolber. I'm a policy analyst in the city manager's office. And thanks for dedicating your time, your Wednesday mornings for a few months to help us tackle this issue. Let's see, I'm really excited about starting this project. I think we've got a lot of opportunities to make some big community benefits for folks that are experiencing houselessness right now and need some transitional help. So I'm excited to start this, and I might turn it over to Counselor Megan Perkins just to kind of welcome everybody, and we can do introductions while folks are trickling in. We also have a fair amount of folks that are listening in. So after we do introductions and look at the agenda, maybe we'll ask them if they want to stay for the whole meeting and then do public comment at the end, or if they want to provide some comment and then get on to their Wednesday. We could provide them opportunity at the beginning and the end. We've done that before in different meetings. So anyway, so I'll hand it over to Councillor Perkins to start.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Sounding Board to House Our Neighbors. Thank you for sacrificing your time to be a part of this. It is a big commitment. I really want to thank the city for putting together, recognizing this need and putting together this sounding board. And special thanks to Susanna for all the work that you've done so far and getting us all here today. And I really want to thank the city for acknowledging that we have to do this and do this quickly. I think there's an urgency here, and I know that we all feel it. Our unhoused neighbors really need us to come up with solutions, but we need to make sure that we're doing this not with a Band-Aid, but with a surgery. And we really need to make sure that we're keeping the public involved in this process. That's why I'm glad to see so many people here with diverse perspectives. So I was hoping that we could, this is my nonprofit background, so I know this is very unlike the city, but I was hoping that we could introduce ourselves and really just say why we're here today and what brought you to this sounding board. And let's see, how should I do this? I guess I could just go on my screen here. Eric, can I call on you first?
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Perkins. Yeah, Eric Tobiason, president of Ben Hears Foundation. We are building the Veterans Village, which is 15 shelters and a community building out on the public safety campus of the county. My background is the state of the project as of last night. So we've broken ground and we should have shelters ready here this summer, maybe even early May, or sorry, mid-May. I joined because I think this is a huge issue in our town. And we've been through the House Bill 4212 process with the city of Bend. And it worked. It worked great. And, it's important that we have this process available going forward because the zoning and development code would be otherwise very complex and difficult to get through, for a shelter otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. That's great news. Councillor Campbell, you are next on my screen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I am here because I believe that everyone has the right to dream, to have enough of a safe shelter that they can literally get enough sleep to get into REM cycle sleep, which is necessary for everyone. So I'm so excited to see everyone here today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Megan.
Hans, you are next on my screen.
Hans Jorgensen, Chair of Neighborhood Leadership Alliance. And I think my primary purpose would be to be sure that I have an opportunity to facilitate with all of you the communication to the community before, during, and after our recommendations. I think it's really vital that we do everything we can to get community input. With that input and with the opportunity to consider what our community wants and solutions, I think we get the support that we want from the community, and ultimately that's what's going to make this more successful, in my opinion.
Thank you, Hans. Stacy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stacy Whitty, and I am the founder and executive director of REACH, and we provide mobile case management and outreach to our unhoused community members. So we are very boots on the ground out in the community. I am here because I believe strongly in the respect and dignity of all of our community members and hope that I can be a voice for them while honoring all of our other communities, which I think is so important. A community is made up of a lot of different models. We have townhomes and houses for rent and houses for sale. And I think when we're looking at this challenge, we need to look at this for our unhoused community members in the same way of providing several different options for those folks. So thank you for including me.
Thanks, Stacy. Kathy?
Hi, Kathy Austin. I'm representing the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee on this effort, and I've been on that for 4.5 years now. So been responsible for helping to give funds out to a lot of the folks here on the call and and I'm an architect, and for nearly 30 years, I've been working on affordable housing and middle market housing. I've personally designed and seen built 2 homeless shelters, and I've been working on the stakeholder group where we've been rewriting the zoning code for HB 2001. And I guess you could say I'm sort of a code wonk, a zoning code wonk. And so if I can offer any suggestions, I'm looking forward to it, and so happy that you have brought us all together on this effort, because my feeling is there, but for the grace of God go I. And I care very passionately about this issue to the point of tears. So whatever I can do, I'm here.
Thanks, Kathy. Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Winters. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and I'm also a designer at a local architecture firm. Does commercial, educational, affordable housing, multifamily, and one of the reasons I'm here is I think similar to what Councilor Perkins said, that this deserves more than just a Band-Aid approach for these people to realize their dreams that Councilor Campbell said, and also similar to Kathy, I am a code geek as well, and it's just kind of a fun language, and I love it. And anything I can do to help out, I'm there. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Good to have code geeks around. Dana.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dana Richards. I am a member of the Homeless Leadership Coalition, the COHC Stable Housing Work Group, and Housing for All. And this is just part of my passion and investment in life. I've been working in social justice and nonprofit work for over 20 years and have managed Oregon's largest emergency shelter, homeless shelter for male identified folks and their animals, homeless shelter for couples, single women and their animals, homeless shelter for women, and an executive director of a homeless shelter for families. And I'm just here to help where I can and echo what Stacy said about, dignity and respect, and what, Councilor Campbell has said about, making sure that folks are comfortable and can dream. And I just really feel honored to be asked to be here. So thanks so much.
Brianna?
Good morning. So I am Brianna Manfres, and I am representing the Bend Economic Development Advisory Board member, as well as I'm an owner at Pinnacle Architecture, and we focus on multifamily housing and permanent supportive housing, a lot of the behavioral health components. And I think a lot of the involvement with BDAB and then getting involved in this group is really to understand sort of, I have one very specific perspective, and it's, about development and bringing these, houses and homes to everyone, but then also balancing that with businesses and the general community and breaking down a lot of the barriers and sort of being, like I would love to be able to be a catalyst and bring the right people to the right table so that we can break down a lot of the barriers that are preventing these things from continuing to happen in a, in a productive way, and just have more of it so that all needs are met. So that's sort of the long and the short of why I'm here.
I see a lot of city staff with their cameras off, so I apologize for calling on you in case you're multitasking, but I do think it's important for us to know, who's a part of this in case we don't know what roles they're playing in the city. So is it okay if I call on Pauline?
Yes, it's okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Pauline Hardy. I work in the city planning department, and my primary role there is to update the development code. So I'm here to listen to see what the code amendments may be, and then to help draft those for everybody.
Thank you. Ian, can I call on you?
Yes, you may. Hey, everybody. I'm Ian Lighthizer with the City Attorney's Office. I think I know a lot of you. For those of you who I don't know, there are 4 of us in the office. I think Mary Winters, the City Attorney, is on the call too. We are the city's in-house law firm. We try to answer questions as well and as quickly as we can. And that includes or can include questions from members of city board commissions or groups like this. So in your respective capacities as members of this group, if you have questions about your work on this group, your role, public meetings or public records, which is something we'll talk about in a bit, you're welcome to come to myself or Mary or any of the other lawyers in our office at any point. So we're here for you to try to help you navigate this work as best we can.
Thank you, Ian. Lynn?
Good morning, Lynn McConnell. I am the Affordable Housing Manager for the City of Bend. This is not actually in my sort of normal day-to-day, but I am trying to pay attention and make sure that I'm aware of what's going on with this group and we can support it from the program the best we can. Thank you.
Great. All right, Mary?
Good morning. As Ian said, I'm Mary Winters. I'm the city attorney, and I can only be here for a short time, but I wanted to meet you all and see the good work that you're starting. Welcome.
Thanks, Mary. Let's see who's John.
Good morning, everybody. I don't have my teal green background on. I apologize. My name is John Skidmore. I'm the Assistant City Manager, Chief Operating Officer for the city. It really was cool. I do know quite a few of you, but Dana, I'd never heard about your background. It was cool to hear some of that. We have a lot of architects here, which is pretty cool. I primarily work with the operations side of the city. So our community development department, our economic development department, which focuses a lot on housing and morphing into homelessness, as well as our utilities and transportation. And so, as you can see, there's a number of staff on the call. The city's kind of venturing into new territory here. This hasn't been something that we've really focused on as a core service. And so I would just request that you be patient with us as we feel our way through this very complex issue and we try to staff up and address things as best we can. We've really been focused more on the police and public safety side of things. Now we're trying to move into a different realm here, and we've got a lot of interest, advocacy, and excitement about it. It's gonna be tough work, but we're glad that you're here to help us with it. So let us know how we can help.
Thanks, John. Shelley?
Good morning, Shelley Smith, Senior Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office. And my portfolio is health and human services. And so I started about a year ago. I've been helping lead the city's diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts. And part of my role will be stepping into helping more with the homelessness portfolio. So I'm here to observe, learn, and so grateful for everyone's participation today.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to keep track of my screen. Michaela, did you want to introduce yourself?
I can say hi. I'm Michaela Oliver, Community Relations Manager. I work with the NLA Advisory Committee, and so I am just popping in today to say hello and observe. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Kayla or Juan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kayla Duddy, and I work in the city manager's office. I'm going to be the committee support to help Susanna with meeting minutes. And yeah, so that's my role.
Thanks, Kayla. Hey, Juan.
Good Morning, everyone. My name is Juan Olmeda, and I am the city's IT operations manager. Just here to make sure that we provide you the best support that we can and make sure that these meetings go as smooth as possible for you and for our community. So great to be here. Thank you.
Juan, I feel like I never see your face. You're always just a voice at city council meetings, so it's good to see your face.
Yes, great to meet you personally.
And last but definitely not least, Susanna.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Susanna Jolver. I work in the city manager's office, and let's see. My background, I have a land use planning background. About 30 years ago, I managed Medford's CDBG program right out of grad school, and have always had sort of a passion for housing and for social service type work. Since I've been with the city about 6 years, I've managed the Septic to Sewer Advisory Committee, and that program, getting that off the ground, and then most recently the transportation bond. And I work, John is my supervisor, so I work on mostly external projects, kind of a wide swath of different things. So I'm excited about this, and yeah, so thanks everyone for dedicating your time and helping us with these code amendments and helping our community and all you do. So let's see. So I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share a presentation that just has the agenda, and we'll go ahead and start. I wanted to, well, why don't I share the presentation that has the agenda and we can talk about it. There's a fair amount of people in the attending the meeting that I believe are here for probably public comment. We have time at the end for public comment, but we could allow some folks to speak at the beginning if they'd like to. We also have a question in the Q&A from Luke from Central Oregon Peacekeepers. Considering this is a session on houselessness and helping our houseless neighbors, is there any reason at least a single individual from that community isn't involved in this conversation? Hearing what they need firsthand would go a long way to understanding how they can get the most immediate and effective help. Yes, absolutely. So Megan, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that, or wait, let's see. Let me go ahead and start this presentation here. We could hear from somebody first. We could move public comment or split it up in here before we start. If Luke or somebody else wanted to address the committee.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, let me see if I can give him. Luke, I'm gonna allow you to talk, and if anyone else would like to speak before we start the meeting, I think we can go ahead and spend a few minutes doing that. I think just in general, our intent is not to exclude anybody, and we've got in a few meetings, you know, or next meeting, we want to talk about what folks need and what type of designs would suit them, and then how we can best do that. So I don't think our intent is to exclude anyone, but go ahead.
Yeah, this is Luke. I just wanted to say I'm not trying to insinuate that that was the intent for this meeting. I definitely understand that this is the first of what's most likely going to be many meetings. But I think the biggest impact that any of these meetings will have will just be hearing it straight from the affected's mouth. So if that's even something that I can help with, I know plenty of individuals that would be more than happy to speak with anybody in the city about what's going on, what they need, as far as what'll help them the most and what'll be the most effective going forward for them.
Okay, great. Is there anyone else that would like to speak right now, or wait till the end of the meeting to provide public comment? You could raise your hand. Mike Satcher, I see you. Okay, go ahead,
Hi.
Mike.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make one very, very brief comment. I actually wanted to commend several people who've spoken so far for using the word houseless instead of homeless. At the top of this announcement for this meeting, the word homeless was used. And it may seem semantic, but I think it's important to start with the baseline understanding that the people we're referring to do have a home, and that home is Bend. And if we recognize that what they don't have is a house, and we start with that baseline understanding, then I think it'll inform all of the decisions that are made going forward. And so that's the sort of word, it might be nice to no longer see that sort of language at the top of agendas like this. And that sort of intentionality could really make a difference. And that's just what I wanted to say at the beginning.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's an important, our language is important. So thanks for pointing that out. Does anyone else want to make a brief comment before we go on to the meeting? Again, you'll be allowed to speak at the end as well. Don't see anyone raising their hands, so we'll go ahead and go on. Okay, great. Thanks for your patience while I negotiate Zoom. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so getting back to the agenda, we've had our welcomes. We're going to talk about a little bit of the purpose of the sounding board, go through the draft schedule and charter. Ian Lighthizer from our legal department is going to give an overview of requirements for committee members. This is a little bit of a different committee because it's a city manager appointed committee, but because of the nature of what we're going to be talking about, it's pretty much like our standard committees that are open to the public with public comment, and he'll go over protocols for committee members. Some of you are already familiar with this because you represent existing committee boards. So we'll try and get through that as quickly as we can. I'll go over pending state legislation regarding houselessness land use solutions. So I'll make sure to change the nomenclature there. I think we're all familiar a little bit with 2006 and House Bill 3261. So we'll go through that. And then Pauline's gonna help me with this, talk about the different types of shelter types that we're thinking about right now. And we would like to get your input and make sure we're not missing something. Because as we go down this road, we wanna make sure that we're making accommodations for different high barrier and low barrier types throughout the city. And then we'll talk about the action items for the next meeting and more public comment. So with that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how this fits into the city's overall strategy for supporting homelessness solutions or houselessness solutions. We're working on a variety of different strategies. As John mentioned, this is a little bit of new territory for us. We haven't typically managed social service type stuff in the past. We're just dedicated to very core services, but it's a huge community priority. So we've got a more comprehensive strategy going forward. And it's certainly a goal of council to start looking at this type of stuff and these issues more holistically. So our role for the sounding board fits it sort of into this area. If you can see my mouse moving, the camps, and we should probably work on that because it's more than just camps. It's different types of shelters and tiny home villages, something similar to Veterans Village, the warming shelter, all that sort of thing, and where that fits in our overall development code. Development code regulates land use and what you can do with your property. And so what we'd like to do is get kind of a strategy to allow different types of housing types citywide. And that's where your role fits in. So our draft schedule, and this will change quite a bit, probably just, it'll be pretty fluid, but we're already in April. So here's our first meeting. Our next meeting is going to be focused a little bit more on what is allowed in our development code, where can we make recommendations for varying uses citywide, and in which zoning districts. Where would we like to see shelters? Should we maybe adjust based on size of the shelter type. So if it's going to house more than 25 people, should it be allowed in only commercial, only in industrial? These are just examples. And can we have smaller shelter types allowed in residential, things like that. And of course, the state legislative stuff that's coming along will impact our work for at least the next year. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to look at best management practices from peer communities, and that might be combined into our next meeting in 2 weeks. Identify potential code amendments. We actually have been working on this already. Pauline Hardy is a workhorse and has already started on this with Elizabeth Oshel, who is another city attorney. So we've got some ideas that we'll bring forward to you all and get your input on. In June, we'd like to do a review, kind of a more community open house outreach type review. I don't know what we're going to be looking at as far as COVID numbers, at that point, but it could be some pop-ups, maybe at that point in person or open houses, but of course have a virtual format as well. So I'm working on some ideas like that, and we'll do an update to the Planning Commission, the City Council on our progress. July, after we're revised based on public input, come back and maybe have another public review session. We'll see how that looks, additional community input. And I can't see because the boxes of people are over the August. But in August, we're hoping that we can go to Planning Commission and then City Council meetings following. Does anyone have any questions on the schedule? You could just unmute yourself and speak. I can't see all the boxes. No? Okay. So it's an ambitious schedule. If you've worked on code amendments before, getting to Planning Commission in August, it's a pretty quick schedule, but I think we can do it, and it's certainly important. So, so I'm going to hand it over to Ian Lighthizer from our legal department now to do an overview of legal requirements. So I'll stop sharing, and Ian, if you need me to, I have your slides also if you can't do it.
Well, I've been, the good or bad news is I've been editing the slides while you've been talking, Susanna. So that means that I've actually got to share it. So let's see.
Stop share. Okay. My closed captioning box is over the stop share. Okay.
Yeah, the last thing you really want a lawyer to be doing is trying to operate technology. So give me 1 second here, and let's see if I can pull it together. Okay. So I think I'm screen sharing. Now I'm going to see if I can convert it to presentation view. Did that work?
No, now we can see your notes, which is okay, but.
Wait, yeah, I have nothing really important in there.
So Ian, if you click on display settings on your notes oh, there you go. You got it.
Got it. Okay. Wow. Thank you, Juan. Without help. Okay. So again, I'm Ian Lighthizer from the City Attorney's Office. I've been told, or I think on the agenda, we've got about 20 minutes for this. I'm going to try to do it in 15 and leave time for any questions. And some of that is because many of you have unfortunately seen this presentation or a version of it, maybe even more than once. So for those of you who haven't, it might be new information. So feel free to ask questions, jump in at any time, and we'll try to save some time at the end. We're going to talk about really two things, public meetings and public records. I sent, or I think it was included with your agenda packet, a memo that goes over some of these things in more detail. So this presentation is going to be, I think, even more cursory than the memo. So to the extent something isn't covered in this presentation, go ahead and look at that memo. Hopefully it is there. And as I said, during introductions, we're always here to answer questions. So first things first, let me see if I can change slides. That worked great. Okay, so first question is what is a public record? And we'll talk about why this is important in a bit, but what it is essentially, and I'm going to paraphrase this definition from the statute, it's essentially anything that is created that relates to any of the work of this group. So that is completely irrespective of the technology or the medium used to create the record. What that means is it doesn't matter what the format of the record is. It has more to do with the content of the record. So if any of you create a record that has anything to do with or relates in pretty much any way to the work of this group, you are probably creating a public record. That can be in an email, that can be in any kind of official document, that can potentially be in a text message, that can potentially be in a note that you write when you're in the car on the back of a receipt left over from the last time you filled up with gas. It really doesn't matter what the format is. If the content relates to the work of this group, you are probably creating a public record. And one of the reasons that's important is because there's a default presumption in Oregon, as with many states, that any person, every person has a right to inspect any public record of a public body of this state. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail when we talk about public meetings law. But what that means is anybody can ask for any public records they want. There usually isn't really a relevance filter when somebody's asking for a public record. Somebody that doesn't live in the city of Bend, that has never been to the city of Bend, that has never heard of the city of Bend, could ask for records generated by this group or members of this group, and they have every right to see them, the same right that anybody else has to see them. So there's a default presumption of disclosure unless an exemption applies. Another reason that it's important to be cognizant of things you can create that can be public records is because public records come with retention obligations. Public records have to be stored, they have to be maintained. If you are creating notes on the back of a cocktail napkin or on the back of a receipt, you are probably also creating a retention obligation. That thing has to be kept because the only way that somebody can ask for it and exercise their right to have access to it is if, as the public body, we have kept it. So different kinds of public records have different retention schedules. Different kinds of records have to be maintained for different periods of time. The Secretary of State's office has promulgated a whole slew of rules about all different kinds of public records that public bodies generate that describe how long they have to be kept. This is just an example. This is not something you need to know, much less memorize, but this is an example of what the state tells us we need to do with budgeting records. It says that the adopted budget has to be maintained on a permanent basis. We can never let that go. Budget preparation records and financial impact analysis records, by comparison, can be destroyed after a certain period of time. So we have all of these minimum retention schedules for all sorts of different kinds of records. I actually can't tell you off the top of my head if you make notes of a phone call that relates to the work of this group on the back of a receipt, how long you have to keep it. But rest assured, the Secretary of State has thought about this and said we have to keep this for a certain period of time. So retention schedules aren't important to know the details of. It's just important to emphasize, at least to me, that if you are creating public records, there is an attendant obligation on the public body to keep them for a certain period of time. So we're going to move through the rest of this public records stuff pretty quickly, but this is really just to direct you to the site that the city has where we have a lot of our public records information collected. We do have an adopted public records policy. We have a flow chart at that page. There is a form at the page. Public bodies cannot require a requester to use a particular form, but we can have a form. We can ask people to use it. It's sort of administratively efficient if requests come in a consistent way through a form, but you don't have to use the form if you're requesting records. You can call, you can email, you can send a postcard, you can do whatever you want to request them. We do also have our retention schedule at that records management page, and that's a place where you can go if you have questions about public records or how the process works. One other highlight I want to mention, and this has a big graphic that says new on it. It's really not so new anymore. This was legislation that became effective in January of 2018, but what Senate Bill 481 did that was important is it imposed some more structured timelines on a public body's acknowledgement and response to a public records request. And the reason I still have this in the presentation is because public bodies have to acknowledge and process public records requests within prescribed periods of time. There are, I won't call them exceptions, but there are cases where you simply can't get the work done due to other work or due to the volume or nature of a request within the prescribed period of time. So in those scenarios, a public body can take the amount of time that is reasonable to fulfill a request. But the reason I have this up here is because if we, the city, do get a public records request relating to the work of this group, we have to move on it pretty quickly. We have to acknowledge it and try to get it completed or fulfilled really as quickly as we reasonably can. So this is really just up here to let you know that if city staff come to any of you, and it's probably the city recorder, but if Susanna is involved in responding to a public records request and she needs something from you, we're gonna ask for a pretty timely response because we have an obligation to try to get through it pretty quickly. So if you ever feel like we're pestering you about a public records issue, that's why. I think this is the last slide on public records, and this is kind of good news, right? It's not bad news, but I think it can be daunting to somebody who's never worked in the public sector when I talk about obligations that are created from you writing notes on a receipt or a napkin. That can be maybe a little bit, if not concerning, it's an obligation that you're just learning that you might have. So I'm trying to balance this with some good news about voicemail. We don't have to save voicemails. So if somebody calls you on your, I'm going to use the personal cell phone as an example. If somebody sends a text to you on your personal cell phone and it's about your work as part of this group or the business of this group, that is probably a public record that you need to maintain because there's a retention obligation. There is a contrast, and I'd say it's maybe a special dispensation with voicemail. Although a voicemail is a public record, you do not have to maintain it. You can listen to it and delete it. So there's sort of one, I think, important and pragmatic exception to the retention requirement. And I want to make this distinction clear. If you get a voicemail that qualifies as a public record because of its content, because it relates to the work of this committee, and if we get a public records request that encompasses that voicemail, it is a public record and we will have to ask for it and disclose it if it is something that you have. But you are not required to keep it. And so that's I think an important distinction. And I think it maybe is not one that we talk about that often, but it is a public record, but you don't necessarily have to save all your voicemails that you get related to your work on this committee. So that's it for public records. I'm going to talk about public meetings really quickly, unless anybody has questions about this so far. Hearing none, seeing none. Okay, public meetings. So only a couple slides on this. This is really covered in more depth in that memorandum. You are, by virtue of your service on this group, part of the governmental decision-making process now. The reason that this city manager appointed group is subject to the public meetings law, and it is because part of what you will be doing is generating and making recommendations to the city council. Because you will be doing that, because you will be making recommendations to another governing body, the sort of highest level governing body of the city of Bend, you are yourself considered a governing body. And the reason the law is set up that way is because it would really be easy to evade the purpose of the public meetings law, which is to make sure that decision-making happens in public. If the law allowed sort of subgroups to do all the work and create recommendations that were only acted on by the ultimate governing body, but those subgroups didn't have to do their work in public. That wouldn't be consistent with the philosophical foundation of the public meetings law, which is that we don't make decisions in smoke-filled back rooms, right? We make them in a way that the public can access. The public meetings law is not a public participation law. It does not actually require a governing body of a public body, whether it's this group or the planning commission or the city council, to take public comment. There are other requirements that require public testimony component in some proceedings, like a land use proceeding, for example. But there is no requirement that a governing body such as this take public comment. Most of them do, but it's not required by the public meetings law. What the public meetings law requires is that meetings be noticed ahead of time, that they be somehow recorded, whether that's on video or through minutes, that they be open to the general public, and that they be accessible. That's what the law requires. And the reason is that the decision-making process needs to be open. It needs to be something that people can see. I will say that the public meetings law was written before we had virtual meetings, really before we had email, certainly before we had social media. So it can be a little bit difficult to make the ways that we communicate with each other now fit within this law. And so if you get annoying emails from the city attorney's office on this subject, we apologize in advance, but we've got communications tools now and information sharing tools that weren't imaginable when people were worried about the literal smoke-filled back room and not Facebook or Twitter or email. So we're kind of, I feel like we're the public meetings laws in Oregon and in other places are kind of going through some growing pains. I think at some point they will be updated to reflect the fact that a lot of dialogue and information gathering and decision making can happen via these other channels in a way that actually can be open and accessible to maybe more people than a traditional city council meeting is, for example, but we're not there yet. And that's something of a segue into one thing I want to talk about that's not in the presentation, but is in the memorandum. Governing bodies, which this is, can get in trouble through electronic meetings or so-called serial meetings. An email between a couple members of a governing body may not in and of itself violate the public meetings law, but if that email between two members then leads to a conversation between a couple of other members and an email exchange between yet a couple of additional members, all of a sudden you have information pinging from one member to another through a series of channels or mechanisms, and lo and behold, you have a body that is effectively discussing business outside of the context of a public meeting. So this is a long way of saying you can, I think, most of the time inadvertently get in trouble under a public meetings framework by doing things like forwarding emails, replying all to emails. If you take anything from this, never reply to all. Just don't do it. Talking about a conversation you had with one committee member to another committee member who then talks about that conversation to another committee member. These things can happen, I think, most of the time inadvertently, but it's really, really important that to the extent you are talking about business that you are dealing with as part of this group, or that you will be dealing with as part of this group, that dialogue, those conversations really should happen within the scope of these public meetings. I'm not saying that two of you can't talk about something that happened in a meeting that doesn't necessarily outside of a meeting. That doesn't necessarily violate the public meetings law. But as those conversations start expanding, which humans tend to do, we tend to talk to each other and then talk to other people, you can run into this serial meeting problem. And there are a couple of cases in Oregon that we outline in the memorandum where other governing bodies have run afoul of that. So that's probably worth a separate presentation in itself, but I did want to highlight it for you. Last slide I'm going to cover today, because this presentation also goes into public official ethics and elections law. I'm not going to go over that today. Feel free to look at it later and ask me questions. But I just wanted to outline some of the other committees and boards that the city has. We essentially have three kinds of governing bodies other than the city council. We have standing committees. These are in our code. These are permanent committees, boards, or commissions that are appointed by the mayor and council. We also have ad hoc committees that are appointed by council. These are temporary. These tend to be intended to tackle a particular issue, a particular problem or project. Once that work is done, they're disbanded. We have a few examples there. Finally, we have this third kind of group, which is what you are. You're a city manager appointed committee, or a group or a working group or advisory body or advisory group. The name isn't really that important, but it's what you do. We have two kinds of city manager appointed bodies. We have bodies that make recommendations or work with staff. And an example of that is our House Bill 2001 stakeholder group that Pauline Hardy is leading. And then in contrast, we have groups like this that are appointed by the city manager, but the charge of the group includes making recommendations to the city council. That's why this group is subject to the public meetings law, where in contrast, Pauline's HB 2001 group is not necessarily. So that's really it from me. That's a repeat for a lot of you, maybe new information for some of you. I'm happy to answer questions now or take them via email at any time if that works better.
Anyone have questions for Ian? You could just unmute. No. Guess not, Ian. Great. Okay. Okay. Well, be sure to just call or email Ian or I if you have questions about that. And I'm going to go over now because I didn't do it before. We can just look at the charter real quick. See if I've missed anything. So let me pull this up. So here's our draft charter that I sent out to you all. I think it's always good. We try at the city to have sort of like operating rules before we before we start. This goes into a little bit of what Ian was talking about as well. So I don't know if you all had a chance to read this, and it basically lays out your purpose, and really your purpose is number 2 here under our council goals and their strategy for the next upcoming year. We're starting a little bit ahead of things, but modify city codes to allow for managed camps, shelters, and other facilities to address homelessness, and create housing or facilities to house 500 homeless individuals on a temporary or permanent basis. So that's a hefty number of units, but this will give us progress towards those 2 goals. We went over the schedule already. Let me know if you have any questions on that. And this dovetails into the next topic. We'll talk about the state legislation, but the work of the state legislation on House Bill 2006 has a sunset of July 1, 2022. So even if it's past this legislative session, the work we're doing is still really critical to providing longer term solutions for transitional housing throughout the city, because the state super siting bill is basically what it has a sunset, but we'll talk about that more in detail. Here's the committee members, talk about city staff support. I'm going to try and get you materials 1 week in advance, but that's pretty difficult when we're meeting every other week for April and May, but I'll try my best. It might be the Friday, like I did this last time. So we have a website set up. I'll make sure that everybody has access to that. And then this is on decision-making, quorum and voting. So we're hopefully going to operate on a consensus building model. You'll be attending meetings and reviewing material as needed. Committee members can ask questions, respect differing views, and work together. When you're not able to agree on a specific recommendation, the recommendation of a majority of the committee will be identified as the primary recommendation. You may be able to do a minority opinion. If that seems like something that's developing, please just be open with us, because there's ways to do it that will just make it easier for everybody. So we'll just try and respect open communication with each other in the group. Let's see, talk about the meeting schedule. I think this is repetitive. The time involved, I'm hoping it's an average of 6 hours a month for this month and the next month, and then it will taper off a little bit. We may have a need for working groups. The committee's small enough and we're on an aggressive enough timeline that I don't think that will be likely, but we can always do that. Communication outside of meetings, Ian just went through that in detail. So does anyone have anything to add to the charter? Just go ahead and unmute.
Susanna?
Mm-hmm.
Hans Jorgensen here. A question looking at the schedule, and it's more than a rhetorical question, but I guess it's a suggestion. I see that by meeting 4 in May, our second May meeting, we identify potential BDC amendments
Mm-hmm.
and we begin drafts. And I guess what I would suggest is if we can find ways to get some community input as to the sorts of concerns, issues, and maybe the pushback we might get, if we could somehow identify community input before that rather than after we come up with some proposals. And I'm just hearkening back to, it seems simple, but recalling that we had some issues when we considered Juniper Ridge for a managed camp. And the concern there was really just, I think, almost a matter of timing. If the folks had heard about it beforehand, there wouldn't have been such a reaction, and I don't think the city would have had to get on a defensive mode to some extent. So I'm just sort of suggesting that if we can be a little proactive in we're collecting input prior to coming up with recommendations that might get more support from our community.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned this, by the way, last night on the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance and asked the representatives of that committee to reach out to their neighborhood associations and get as much input. I've also encouraged people to attend these meetings, but obviously that's always a challenge for all of us. But anything that we can do to collect input before we make recommendations, I think would help us get more support.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we can definitely I can work with Michaela and Joshua to maybe try and well, I know we're going to be doing pretty current like news blurbs and things like that, but just to make sure that folks have the most accurate information, we can definitely do that. Yeah. Do you have any other ideas on how to get the news out to folks? Get some review?
I would say that the communications department does stellar work. I work with them, and I appreciate the support I get from Michaela day in and day out. I think if we can utilize the NAs, Michaela puts out a piece every Friday to all the NA leaders, and I think if we have something in there to really promote this opportunity for community input, I think that'll go a long ways. And maybe a little bit of information. Again, we love to have people involved, but we really appreciate when they're informed and involved. So if we can do just a little piece that's a little bit educational and promotes input and participation, again, we'll get whomever we get, but at least if we do that, we can't be faulted for trying to get input before we make recommendations.
Yeah, okay. Good
I like
suggestion.
that
Yeah.
idea. I might add that if we could come up with some questions maybe, or like agenda, like please provide feedback on XYZ or something that might pare the information down, and then they could even report back on just those, or we could send it out and get, who are our contacts, and you could send that out and then have feedback given that way, and we could collectively bring it just from different perspectives. That might be a way to pare down the information and get more feedback.
I would offer up too that we, as a result of Juniper Ridge and as a result of a survey the NLA did requesting input on the idea of managed camps, although that's only one thing that we're considering here, I think there's already some information available that we can start with and understand. I think Michaela, I'll volunteer Michaela as the person that could probably collect this information and feedback for our consideration offline perhaps, so that we're all just aware of the sorts of things that the community has already expressed in terms of their issues, concerns, and the things they'd be willing to support.
We could also do something, I mean, I know for the transportation bond, we had a super simple, like 3-question survey and had, some multiple choice questions basically, and then people could add projects that they wanted to see. And even though it wasn't like statistically valid information, it was really interesting to see like, oh, this project, or this area is getting like 2,000 responses, or like they think this is important. That's, pretty valid information. So we could do something like that once we're along the way in recommendations. And that's a pretty easy way. We could just host it online. I know a lot of people don't have access to the internet, but we could figure out some way to get the word out, kind of a combination of different tools. So Yeah, good ideas. I think we can definitely do that. Does anyone else? Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw my support behind the proposal. In our project, we had early contact with the neighbors and sought their opinion and feedback. And I think it's been a real opportunity to partner with the neighborhood and the larger neighborhood association. And I think it's created a real productive dialogue and have been proactive versus reactive, for the project. So really like this idea that Hans surfaced.
Eric, I would reach out to you and say, good job on that effort too. I know you reached out to Boyd Acres very early. I offline participated in a little communication there, and I think it went a long ways for the acceptance of your project. And part of it was just helping people understand what was proposed and take them away from their fear factor or their own self-defined idea of what this meant to them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's see. I'm going to share again. Moving on. No, not that. Sorry. 2 documents. Here we go. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit next about, I will revise the charter and send it out to folks. And I think I'll work with Michaela and Joshua to try and figure out a way that we can kind of make sure we're getting active news out there to the community about this topic, and then a way that we can get some community support, input along the way. And there was a question in the chat about receiving input from folks that are houseless, and absolutely we can figure out a way to do that. I have some ideas, so we can talk about that maybe at the next meeting. So I'll come back with some ideas on that. So I wanted to just go over real quick the bills in the House that are under consideration right now, concerning houseless folks. So House Bill 2006 and House Bill 3261. These have passed the House, but as far as I know, they haven't passed the Senate. I think they're scheduled for Senate hearings, and Lynn, go ahead and unmute and speak up if you have more information on that than I do. But House Bill 2006 requires a city to approve an application for an emergency shelter that includes sleeping and restroom facilities, other facilities, does not need to comply with local land use process. Still has to comply with building codes, is within a UGB, is not cited in a map, natural hazard or disaster or hazard zone, and complies with hazard regulations, has adequate transportation access to commercial and medical services, will not pose an unreasonable risk or public health or safety. And House Bill 2006 is time limited. As I mentioned before, it expires July 1, 2022. So what that means in essence is that emergency shelters and transitional housing types like Veterans Village and other things like that can get emergency approval regardless of land use right now. I am not sure if it overrides CCNRs. We have a lot of neighborhoods in Bend that have CCNRs, and some of our, I hear Ian maybe unmuting, but some of our land use regulations don't apply there because the CCNRs are more restrictive. But what this means is right now until 2022, if this passes, a shelter type, transitional housing, whatever type of managed camp could be cited in any zoning district throughout the city. Ian, do you have any input on that?
Sort of by reference. I actually haven't looked at 2006 as closely as some others, but if it's analogous at all to House Bill 2001, it would not override pre-existing CCNRs. It might prevent new ones in conflict from being adopted, but it wouldn't override those that already exist. And that's what HB 2001 does, to be clear. So if 2006 is following the same approach, that's what we can expect.
Yeah.
I can build off that a little bit if that's okay. So House Bill 2006 is very close to what came through in emergency legislation over the summer, House Bill 4212. That is the statute that allowed Eric Tobiasen to cite the Veterans Village without having to bother with our development coach. So the requirement really is just that zoning more or less doesn't matter as long as the applicant can prove that it is going to be safe and accessible for folks to stay in these places. So I believe 3261 had a hearing yesterday in the Senate Housing Committee, and it looks like that was continued. They'll do it again today, as well as House Bill 2006. So that's at 1 o'clock if folks want to watch that hearing. 1 o'clock today in the Senate Housing, and I expect those will probably move forward to the floor shortly after.
So great, thanks for that info, Lynn. I was not in touch with that. So yeah, so just a heads up, these may change, but they are moving, and it's important stuff that we should keep track of. Kathy, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the CCNRs and at what point when an HOA is defunct and there have been no meetings, does it in any way invalidate the CCNRs? I've heard conflicting information on this, and I'm curious as to what legal ways there may be to impose this over non-existent HOA CCNR enforcement. So I just wondered if Ian had any comment on that.
Yes, sort of. I mean, practically speaking, what an inactive or underactive HOA means usually is that there's nothing to enforce CCNRs. It's usually an HOA that conducts enforcement. Again, these are private agreements, private restrictions between an HOA and people who buy property. So government, including, doesn't have a role in really thinking much about them, much less enforcing them. So if there's an HOA that isn't active anymore, you usually have, effectively you have a restriction, but nobody to actually enforce it. Whether a dissolved or inactive HOA means that the particular restrictions are no longer valid may have something to do with how they're written, how the HOAs by. I mean, that's a little bit hard to say. I'm not aware of any sort of, I can't think of any hard and fast legal trigger that says if an HOA has been defunct for X number of years, this applicable CCNRs no longer apply, but I'm also not an HOA lawyer. So, but what it usually means is if there's no HOA, there's really no realistic probability of enforcement. And that's a situation that happens, I think, not just in Bend, but in a lot of places where you have property owners that might be violating a CCNR that they effectively agreed to when they bought the property, but there really isn't an enforcement entity that's either paying attention or active or otherwise interested in enforcing the rules.
So there's no case law right now that would invalidate those CCNRs that we could look to establish a precedent for overriding them.
I can't say that there's not, but so again, not being an HOA lawyer, and one of the reasons I don't know if there's not is because as a city, we take the position, as most cities do, that and this is analogous, I think, but hopefully helpful. We take the position that we enforce our codes, right? We don't enforce typically private agreements, and the existence of CCNRs in terms of, for example, a typical development application decision that the city would make is not particularly relevant. So I can't say that there's no case law because I don't know.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions right now on House Bill 2006?
Susanna, not a question, but I would say that based on what we have heard at the NLA level from NAs and what council has heard, I think this slide is really a useful slide when we do the information, education piece, the sorts of things that people really react to are, for instance, does not need to comply with land use process. That'll be important. Also, adequate transportation access for medical services, health and safety, those are issues that were highlighted by the community. So I think if they understand that those 2 points I know are going to be really hot topics. So when they understand, for instance, that the law does not require the land use process be observed, that's going to put a lot of these arguments, it's not going to put them to bed, but it's certainly going to do a lot in terms of table setting so that people understand what can be done, what can't be done. And obviously, there's been criticism that the city hides behind a state law. We are going to be compliant. We're also going to be listening to our community, but I think to the extent that the community is informed, this slide goes a long ways to doing that.
Yeah, I think it's important that, like you said, the table setting, because this is definitely probably coming. And so I think neighborhoods who might be opposed to these type of things should maybe get involved on the design of them, because if they're allowed regardless of land use, we might see more of these. I mean, I think that's the whole intent, to make it easier and safer to provide housing for folks that need it in safe and respectful ways. So yeah. Let's see, anyone else? Go ahead and unmute since I can't see you. Okay. House Bill 3261 is similar to our project Turnkey. It requires the city to unconditionally allow the conversion of the lawful use of a property from a hotel or a motel to use as an emergency shelter. And same thing if it's in an urban growth boundary. If it's not designated for heavy industrial use, I don't think we have any hotels in HI, but I'm not totally positive, has adequate transportation access and is not within a designated hazard or natural disaster area. And same thing, we can require building code compliance, occupancy limits, but not the land use process. The land use process can't circumvent that. So does anyone, Lynn, I don't know if you have any updates on that also, or if anyone has any questions.
Sorry, Susanna, I was just working on the Q&A topic, so I was halfway tuned out. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. 3261. Do you know?
Oh yeah, so yeah.
You always know more than me, so.
That's also slated, and what I'll do if folks are interested is just paste into the Q&A the link to the hearing and work session this afternoon in case folks are interested in watching it go through Senate Housing today. So I'll do that in just a moment.
Great, thank you. Okay, anyone have any other questions about that? No, so important stuff going on at the state that pertains to our work. So let's see, next, I'm gonna ask Pauline Hardy to help me with this a little bit. We wanted to kind of walk you through our work in prep for the next meeting. What we were wondering about, we have kind of thought about different shelter types in this column 1 as sort of four basic kind of types. So the first one is a mass shelter, so a large gathering space. The sleeping area is not separated by partitions or rooms or anything. So an example would be our warming shelter. Next, we've thought of outdoor shelter sites, so a lot or a parcel with temporary units. So it would be like Eric's Veterans Village and Kobo's Veterans Village. Hope Village in Medford is another example, Dignity Village in Portland. So it's a lot with, Eric, do you want to talk about Veterans Village actually? So I'm not the only one talking.
Sure. Yeah, basically it's on leased ground, and it's about an acre. We have 15 individual occupancy shelters, so not double occupancy, not family, just individuals, with a community building for services for case management, showers, laundry, dining, kitchen, and just generally community, like a great room for being communal. And there's no segregation on the individual shelter parcels, if you will. There's not a parcel. You just have, the shelter is 12 by 12, and the space for your shelter is maybe 18 by 20, but there's not any particular ownership or anything like that. It's just space on the ground on leased property.
Okay, great. And are those folks under case management?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have on-site case managers pretty much 7 days a week, at least 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, with case plans for every individual that's in the program. Covo is going to be operating it, so I'm on the construction side of building the particular project, but yeah, Covo has case managers that will be assigned to each of these villagers.
Okay, great. And so this is sort of like, people have seen Pallet. I have a picture of Pallet in another slide, but there are these white kind of emergency shelters that go up pretty quick, and they've been going up. Medford's got them, Portland, Hood River, Eugene, I think, and a whole Santa Clara, California. They're kind of these small, I think they're like 46 square feet or something like that. There might be a little bit, 96 square feet. But they go up really quick, and they're sort of like the tiny home village type of concept. So this is kind of what we were thinking as far as at the outdoor shelter site. And then short-term shelter, permanent facility with individual rooms is sort of like the Bethlehem Inn or the Project Turnkey or the motel model that turns into a transitional housing site. And then the last thing, Hans, go ahead.
Just curious, since it was a hot topic, where would you say managed camps would fall in terms of shelter type?
Probably in this outdoor shelter site category. So yeah, that's a good distinction.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, Brianna.
And this is, I mean, I think related, but a little on a side note, but what's the process for getting access to these units? Is there like a wait list? Is it first come, first serve, that type of thing?
Yeah, maybe I can stop sharing for a sec and have maybe Eric and Stacy, folks that are in the, actually, I'm going to do this. Folks that are in the business, maybe talk about that. Let me see if I can stop sharing. Okay.
I also want to mention briefly, I forgot to say in the beginning, I actually used to manage Kenton Women's Village, which is in Portland, which is a tiny village for folks identified as female also, so can possibly provide some information regarding that too.
Okay, great. So, Stacy or Eric or another provider want to talk about the process to get into a place?
Absolutely. This is Stacy. I think that this could be open for discussion, but the way things are working in many of the different programs is through a coordinated entry model where an assessment form is filled out, much like we did at our isolation motel. And so the way the system has been working is those that have the highest score, meaning that they're the most vulnerable, would get placed into units. So I think that would be something we'd have to kind of discuss and make a decision. Is it going to be based on vulnerability, or would it be based on first come, first serve? And I think that is something that will have to be decided. So anyway, and I think there's going to be a variety as people, we talk to our unhoused community members, we want to empower them to have decisions as to where they also feel that they would be most successful. And that model is going to be really important because we have to remember we're not just going to grab someone, pluck them off the ground and pop them into a model that we think is appropriate, that we really want to be working with them and seeing what their goals and agendas are for themselves. So there are two models right now for how we do that.
Great. Okay, Hans.
Yeah, generally.
Go ahead, Eric.
Just a question. Obviously, we're concerned with the folks here in Central Oregon, and at the risk of this being misunderstood, there is a sense of one of the concerns was if you build it, they will come. Is there a way that without being discriminatory, we can be sure that we're focusing on the needs of Central Oregonians as opposed to others that may come? I think I've asked this question before in an NLA setting, so maybe just for the benefit of me or anyone else that doesn't recall that, how do we ensure that we're working on our primarily Central Oregonians?
Lynn, do you want to go ahead and, I think Lynn has some good input on
Yeah, so federal fair housing law, this is one of those places where it just gets really complex. We are a predominantly white community. And so if we put any sort of residency requirements in place, that could be seen as discriminatory towards our BIPOC community. So unfortunately, I have not been able to thread that needle in a way that sort of helps benefit the fabric of our current society without appearing to be discriminatory. I am open to suggestions if folks want that. I think we're very aware at the city that, you know, we want to support the existing residents of the city, but so far we haven't found the way to do that effectively without violating fair housing law. I will say, and I think Stacy and others probably can back me up on this, the vast majority of folks identified through our annual point in time homeless count became homeless while residing in Central Oregon. So the vast majority of folks who are out there are in fact from the region and lost housing while they were here already and have remained here as well. So there are a handful of folks who move here because this is where their family support system is, and then you know that may go south after some amount of time. But the good news is primarily the folks who are experiencing houselessness here in Central Oregon have become houseless while they were here.
And as I recall, we know this population pretty well, so that there's some assurance there, but I think it's good for everyone to understand that there's some difficulty and it is complex. Anyone that thinks this isn't complex is probably misled or misinformed.
Yeah, there's a slide that we've seen in the BDAB community that breaks down the sort of, I think the survey that Lynn just mentioned. I think that would be a great tool to share with more people. I don't think I have a copy of it, but I'm sure it lives somewhere. It's very helpful to understand where people were, how many we're currently serving, how many are left, the underserved, that type of thing.
I can get that for next time or send it out after that. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay. Does anyone else?
I offer this up because I think that in terms of, you know, we have some salesmanship to do here. It's information education, but it's also a little bit of explanation. And I think those are the sorts of questions, although they're unpleasant, they get asked. And we certainly don't want to avoid those questions, but it's important to people to understand that we've already thought about some of these things and we're not just sweeping something under the rug.
Yeah. Okay, and also Lynn has a link to fair housing training. I meant to send that out to you. It's just a YouTube video, I think. And so I'll get that for you all and I'll send it out before the next meeting because I think it's important stuff, gives some context to what we're doing as well.
The one other thing I think, just to interject one other idea, is to keep in mind the housing first model, which basically welcomes all. So any kind of drug use or alcohol use would not prohibit someone from entering into one of these models. And I think there's enough data and research that indicates that when we can help someone get stable in their living situation, whether that's what we think of traditional housing or outside, that is where they can start building some more independence and self-sufficiency. And I would say after 17 years of doing this, I really do think that the key to success in this is the ongoing case management and relationships that we build with our houseless community. I think that is critical.
Great. Yeah, good perspective. Does anyone else, Eric, you're nodding your head. I don't know if you have something to add. I think you were trying to speak earlier.
Oh, well, yeah, just to repeat the point that case management is been shown to be the effective component versus just providing, you know, structures for houses. So I just wanted to plus one that comment. And, you know, going back to the earlier question about entry, yeah, coordinated entry seems to be the most effective model, and that's generally what COBO uses in a process and a measurement technique to identify the barriers, and you know, because that's used in the case management process to remove those barriers over time. You know, set up the benefits and remove the barriers. So definitely not a first come, first serve, more of a coordinated entry system would be, my input as an effective model. Thank you.
There is a system, and I'm not sure if I'm saying something that everyone already knows. It's called the VI SPDAT, and I know our veterans use that as well. And essentially, it is an assessment tool to assess the vulnerability of those that are experiencing homelessness. And we find that when someone that has had a relationship with those folks are doing the VI SPDAT, we're getting much more accurate data and information. And that's what we're using for the coordinated entry right now in our housing with Fuse and rapid rehousing program models. So that's been pretty effective.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I was just going to add one of the things that I've been thinking about as I've talked to people just in general about what's going on and what their knowledge is around it, and myself included, is that there's so much that's unknown or assumed that hasn't been validated. So I think a big part of what we could do is more of sharing those stories. And I mean, obviously there's some personal things that you might have to limit, but I think how we can display that or get that to as many people as possible and change the perception of what in our minds we may have envisioned this to be when we talk about drug or alcohol or any of those other things, that becomes like what people get stuck on, and then we forget about what is actually trying to be accomplished. And so I think, and maybe this becomes something totally separate, but I think that's a huge part of how we can move things forward, is really explaining, these might be people you've worked with before or that but you don't know their story. And that is 100% of why it's such a hard thing to get over, because they don't understand what the real background is. So just thought I'd add that.
I just like to say that my understanding is most of our houseless community, or a lot of them, are working locally, which is why they want to stay here, because it's their only source of income. And I think there's a misperception in the community at large that everybody that's homeless has no job and they're on drugs and all those negative things. So the more, I would agree with everything that Hans has brought up and everyone else, that you need to be proactive in getting that information out there, and that these are things we have thought about, and there are processes and standard ways of doing this, that that education piece is going to be critical to avoid the kind of negative pushback that we'll get anyway. But the more people who understand the situation and have the information, I think the better off we'll be overall in accomplishing our goals. And I do appreciate the intake process rather than or the evaluation for vulnerability as opposed to first come first serve. I think that's really critically important when we're trying to look at the health and maintaining the health and well-being of our community. So I would be one to vote towards that established process as opposed to a first come first serve kind of model. So just wanted to say that.
The one other piece we'll have to be really careful about is we have to be realistic to understand that some of our most vulnerable community members may not necessarily be those that are successful in these models. And what's going to happen is it's going to identify another gap in services, which is what I would call more of a supportive housing model, where those that are experiencing mental health conditions and challenges they deserve the dignity of being in a housing model as well, but may need more supports around them. So that's the one, I think, probably challenge I've seen with this model, is that top percent of people that are most vulnerable will need some additional supports.
Right. Okay, I'm going to go back to our chart and make sure that, unfortunately, this is all really great, but we operate in this bureaucratic environment with the development code, and we need I mean, obviously if House Bill 2006 is passed, this is kind of a moot point, but for us to operate beyond that, and even if it passes and Some folks might want to choose to do the land use process because I don't know, maybe their funding is tied to grants or something like that, and it provides more certainty if we've got this stuff embedded in our regulations for them. We have to look at things in terms of not so much the management type. I mean, I think we could talk about, if you look at the chart, the shelter type and which zoning district, let's see, like which zoning district are these allowed in, and then what type of standards. And we could probably look at it in terms of high barrier and low barrier shelters, which is probably, it might be outdated terminology that I'm using, so you can correct me if I'm saying that wrong. But for each of these, I would think that there's a different management piece to it that maybe is a high barrier, low barrier type of management type. And so those could be sort of identified by zoning district, if that makes sense, like a high barrier shelter. So there's more management and more direct day-to-day work with the folks that are using the services. Might be allowed, you know, up to 20 people in a residential district. The same type of model might be up to 30 units in a commercial district, something like that. So we could talk about that along the way, and we don't have to do that today, but the main thing Pauline and I were wondering about today is, do we have the right categories in this first column? So we can start kind of working on which zoning districts are these type of things allowed in and what standards should be applicable. So standards are things like outdoor gathering space, parking, should there be a density type of thing, like so square footage per bed, things like that. Some of that gets into building code issues. So I'm just going to go down this first column here again. So we've got the warming shelter model type, the outdoor shelter. So it would be the tiny village type stuff, managed camp type of thing, short-term shelter in a permanent facility. So Bethlehem Inn or Project Turnkey. And then we get a lot of requests for, and I think this is something that the sounding board should probably make a recommendation on, for private residences to house a relative or a friend who might be homeless in an RV. And it is not permitted right now in the city. If you think about it, there's a lot of folks out there. I mean, I've been working with somebody over the last few weeks who has a relative who's homeless, and she doesn't want to, she has an RV, she just doesn't have a place to put it. She doesn't want to go out to Hunnell Road. She doesn't want to be in a service type of thing. She's a functioning person that has a job. She just doesn't have a place to live. Her brother has a driveway and a big property. It's kind of like on the outskirts of town. But under our code, they aren't allowed there. So we get more than a few requests like that. With the wildfires from last summer, we have an emergency order that allows them through the emergency order. So that would be through the end of June. But after that, they won't be allowed. And then we've got something called a medical hardship housing permit, which would allow something like that. But for a lot of people in town, they might just need that short-term ability to camp in their neighbor's driveway or their relative's driveway. So that's the other type of housing we were envisioning. But we wanted to ask you as experts out there, are there other types? What are we missing? Hans, you mentioned the managed camps. I think that would go into this outdoor shelter site parcel type model for temporary units. Is there anything else that we are sort of missing here?
I don't know that we're missing it, but I recall from a presentation the Homeless Leadership Coalition did to the NLA that we do have a small subset of our house lists that may not really take to some of these models. We just kind of need to acknowledge that their needs or their preferences or their willingness to fit into one of these boxes might be a challenge at some point down the road. But I certainly don't have the knowledge to know what percent of our approximately 1,000 house lists are in that group, but they do need to be considered as well.
Reach is operating a safe car parking program, and I don't know if that falls under this. Our challenge has been, we have the bandwidth to run this program. We've got the support of the city has been amazing in Bend PD. The challenge has been finding locations. We currently have 5 vehicles and 10 people that are in safe car parking, and they don't have a lot of amenities, access to water and a porta potty and hand washing station. And then we do have daily case management. So each person, we're kind of co-creating a plan with that person of what the next steps are and how can we help you get more successful in that independence piece. So I don't know if safe parking would fall into that, but I do think that's an important piece to this whole picture.
Right, so safe parking would ultimately fall under this outdoor shelter site. So I figured you all probably knew already, but we adopted a safe parking program. The city just did through our municipal code under state statute. We're allowed to have up to, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, 3 vehicles in a private setting and in a public, like attached to a service, like a church or a school or something like that, a nonprofit. You can have up to 6. And so the safe parking programs are in effect right now. And so that's something that people can use right away. And once we develop the development code provisions, the safe parking program will fall under that, but that fits into this outdoor shelter site as well. So thanks, Stacy, for reminding me of that.
I have a comment or question mostly for Pauline. We've been talking about micro units and small clusters of micro units that look like a single family home versus, you know, a multi-story type of thing. Would that fit into the short-term shelter permanent facility with individual rooms type of? It's a little different than Bethlehem Inn or Project Turnkey. So I just wanted to ask, I mean, it's something that has to be developed. It doesn't exist right now.
I would say, excuse me, yes, Kathy, that's something we can look at to make it clear when we do the code writing. But yes, the short-term shelter permanent facility would be most likely the best fit for the micro units.
Okay, great. Because those are envisioned as being able to be in the residential zones, particularly if they're small that look like a home type of unit, as opposed to just restricting it to a commercial district.
Right. They are currently allowed in the medium and high density residential districts.
Okay, thank you.
Can I clarify, but micro units aren't necessarily meant to be short term, are they?
That's
we
a
didn't
good
put
point.
a length of stay on the micro unit, so they could be a 30-day rental or longer, I suppose. But if we are interested, we could also change that, or somehow put it in the code under the temporary or transitional housing standards too, to help it fit better into the short-term shelters as well. You can have both.
If we can have both, I think it's good. There's a lot of examples in other parts of the country where it is a permanent thing and people can live there until they pass away, or if they need, it doesn't have to necessarily be a situation where it's temporary till you find something more permanent. So, it's a model that can kind of go in both directions, and where does that fit? I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, it seems like it fits a little bit under the Project Turnkey type idea, but yeah, not necessarily like a hotel, or not necessarily a short-term stay. Yeah. Okay, are we missing anything else? And of course, we can come back to this at another meeting. My thought is for the next meeting, we can do peer cities. We can shift things around and look at some examples and make sure, that what we're going to be providing in the code or what people like, as far as like, this is the housing type that would work for our population, or that we think might work. And then we are making the right provisions in our code for that. So I think that's what I'd like to do, if that sounds good. Yeah, have some examples to go by. Let's see. had a question, but I lost it. Let me stop or go on. And then, so our goal basically is to develop these categories, make sure we're looking at the right zoning districts for them, by size, by type, whether they're high barrier or low barrier, and then what type of standards should we include. So that's kind of the sounding board's role. Okay, let's see. So I was just going to summarize for next time before we've got about 20 more minutes, and I know people want to get out right away, but I'm going to send out the fair housing stuff. I want to do a language type check to make sure we're using the right terms, houselessness instead of homelessness. Let's see, I'll change the charter to add the additional public input opportunities, and I'm going to work on some different ways we can maybe do that and come back with some ideas. Make sure that we're providing for managed camps, which I think we are under the outdoor shelter use. Let's see, I think that's about it. Am I missing anything for action items for the next meeting? I'll be sending out sort of like, this is what we're going to cover pretty soon. So just let me know.
Susanna, if we have examples from around the country of successful projects, would you like us to send you a link as to have as much visual vocabulary as possible?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll try to do that. Thank you. Okay, great. And I think next we've got public comment. So there's a lot of folks in the lobby. Let's see. Would you go ahead and raise your hand, folks that are waiting, if you're gonna, if you'd like to provide public comments so we know how much time to give you? I see 3 right now. Eric, Mike, and Matt. Okay, why don't we go ahead and do that. Eric, I'm going to allow you to talk. Eric Garrity.
Hi there.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Yeah, no, I thought today's meeting was great. And I just wanted to thank all the members for taking the time out of their day to work on this. It is really important work. I thought some of the suggestions about community outreach were really, really well taken, because I think that is super important, especially for the members of this board. You have the power to push back on some of those misconceptions. Not to name names, but for example, I was listening to the NLA meeting a few weeks ago, and there was a ton of misconceptions that aren't based in research, facts. It was just sort of anecdotal, what I would call fear mongering. And so I would just ask each of the members here to really do the work on pushing back on those misconceptions when you encounter them, because for instance, we do have, I think it's less than 15% of people that have been in Bend for less than 12 months. So it's the sort of transient problem is not really one that is backed up by the numbers. And yeah, and just as one example, in the NLA meetings, I know people were like concerned about managed camps increasing the risk of wildfires, which just seems afactual and just more scaremongering. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of hit home that point and thank everyone, because I thought there was a lot of good discussion today. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Sorry. Mike Satcher, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi, so I want to start by just echoing what Eric said and thanking you all for your time and for doing this work. There's just some really important ideas that were just discussed this morning, and I'm happy to see that this work is being done. That said, there's some immediate relief that can and should be delivered, but that the city isn't working on yet. Private volunteers are doing things like providing restrooms and trash collection services at camps. For example, John Riggs is doing amazing work in Central Oregon, and he's doing it with little to no help from public bodies like the city. I've been privileged to have the opportunity to work with John, driving around to camps, doing trash collection. And when our neighbors know that somebody's going to come by with a truck and collect trash, they're just overjoyed and more than willing to collect that trash and stage it so somebody can put it on a truck and take it away. There's also an amazing proof of concept example of restrooms being provided out at Hunnell Road. And the residents themselves are showing that they are more than up to the task of caring for those porta potties. The porta potties on Hunnell have been out for a couple months now, and they're absolutely spotless. I think it was also a couple months ago that Mr. Skidmore spoke at a city council meeting about how this porta potty idea couldn't work. But now we have a real world and real time example in play showing that it does. These are the sorts, it would be really nice to see the city get involved in helping these volunteer groups with that kind of immediate triage work, like trash collection, like restrooms. And I think a lot of people would be happy to see those sorts of topics come up in future meetings for this group. So thank you for your time.
Okay, great, thank you. And Matt Puccio Jr., I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing. I'm gonna allow you to talk. Okay, go ahead.
You got it right the first time. I was very, very excited. So yeah, my name's Matt Puccio. I have been working to gather needs from houseless folks. I just kind of go out with my little laptop and I say, hi, my name's Matt. Do you need anything? And it's mostly just like a little bit of clothes, a little bit of household goods, not a lot of need. The only other need is to have police stop harassing people who are otherwise minding their own business. I recognize that, you know, there's like we've talked about, there's these misconceptions about houseless folks, and I would really, really love to work with some of you amazing people who have raised so many awesome points about like low barrier and you know combating pushback from the community. I think that there needs to be work done to humanize the folks that are suffering due to the failures of our system. Like it's not anybody's like fault necessarily, but just the way that our system is set up, people drop out of it and then they are demonized. And so we have all these ideas about means testing and, you know, what barriers do we need to put between people and not dying on the streets. And we absolutely need to have on the table, and the priority needs to be no barrier housing. The priority needs to be people can exist without being harassed. And I'm so hopeful and thankful for all of the work that you're doing. And I look forward to being along for this ride, and hopefully we can like get people's stories amplified so that they can not just be seen as like vagrant criminals. Okay, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else in the attending want to provide public comment? Go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you. Mute you. I don't see anybody. Okay. Eric, you've got your still up. Did you want to talk again? No, okay. I guess not. Okay, I'm just gonna move on. Okay, so do folks have any more questions? And let's see. Juan, can you stop? There you go. Okay. Let's see here.
Could I just say something really quick to Matt Puccio, who was just speaking?
Sure.
I'm on the Bend Bulletin's editorial advisory board, and I would love to be able to connect with you, and maybe we could put together a column for the bulletin, or maybe a series of stories that help humanize these folks. I think not everybody reads the bulletin, but it's better than nothing in terms of reaching out and demystifying some of the lives of these folks. So just wanted to put that out there, or anyone who wants to contact me to see if we can't get more information out there. So that's all.
Okay. Anyone else have anything for the good of the order, our next meeting is in 2 weeks, same time. Sorry about all the emails. I'm going to be canceling the Teams meetings that I set up and sending out the Zoom meeting links. So you're going to get a flood of emails. Sorry about that, but yeah, it's just the way it's going. So let's see. I know Lynn was going to get the link for the hearings this afternoon, and I can email that to all of you once she's done that. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, sorry, I stuck it in one of the question responses. It's actually tomorrow afternoon. I'm so sorry. I keep hitting the wrong buttons on all these Q&As. I hope I'm not messing everybody up, but it is in one of the responses to one of the Q&As out there. Sorry.
Okay, I'll find it and send it out to everybody, or I'll get it sent out to you guys. But it's tomorrow, it sounds like, so you have some more time. So we're at, let's see, 10:48. So good. I've made a commitment to get these meetings stick on the 2-hour time slot. So yeah, and we can even put in a 5-minute break next time, I think. So Megan, did you have anything you wanted to add, or anyone else?
I just wanted to say thank you. This was some really great discussion today, and I'm really looking forward to working with you all.
Great, me too. All right. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for your time and everything. Bye, everyone.